The world doesn't end with a bang. For me, it ended with the sound of screeching tires and the sickening crunch of metal folding like paper. The glass shattered. The air took on the metallic tang of blood and radiator fluid. I remember the cold night air rushing into the car, smelling of wet asphalt and pine. Now, everything is different. I am lying in a bed that smells too much of bleach. I am trapped in a body that feels heavy, like it's made of lead. People are moving around me, their lips moving, their eyes filled with pity. They think I am locked in a tomb of silence. They think the accident stole my world. But I can hear everything. I can hear the hum of the heart monitor. I can hear the soft scuff of the nurse's shoes. And I can hear him. It happened on our 3rd anniversary. Julian was driving. He was always a fast driver, his hands gripping the leather steering wheel with a possessive strength that I used to find attractive. "I'll take care of you, Elias," he had whispered that night, right before the headlights of the truck blinded us. Always. When I woke up, the light was blinding. A doctor with a voice like sandpaper was talking to Julian. I tried to speak, but my throat felt like it was filled with glass. I tried to listen, but a strange, heavy pressure sat behind my ears. "The trauma to the temporal lobe was severe," the doctor said. I watched his lips move, but I also heard the vibration of his words. It was faint at first, like a radio station out of tune, but then it snapped into focus. "The neurological pathways are unresponsive. Mr. Thorne, your husband, is profoundly deaf. Given the brain imaging, it's likely permanent." I saw Julian's shoulders drop. He covered his face with his hands. To anyone else, he looked like a man whose world had just collapsed. He looked like a grieving lover. "No," Julian choked out. His voice sounded thick with tears. "He's a musician. His whole life is sound. Please, tell me there's a way." I wanted to reach out. I wanted to tell him, "Julian, I'm here. I can hear you. It's a miracle. I can hear you." But then he leaned over me. He took my hand in his. His skin felt dry and cold, and he pressed a kiss to my forehead. "I'll be your ears now, Elias," he whispered against my skin. "I'll love you even if you never hear another note. We'll get through this. I'll never leave your side." I believed him. For 3 days I lay there pretending to be trapped in that silence because the doctors said the shock might be too much if I tried to react too soon. I watched him play the part of the devoted husband. He brought me lilies. The scent was so strong it made my head ache. He held my hand for hours. It was the 4th night. The hospital was quiet, save for the rhythmic hiss-click of the ventilator in the next room. Julian was sitting in the armchair by my bed, flipping through a folder of papers. He thought I was asleep. My heart starts to rabbit in my chest as I hear the sharp snap of a briefcase closing. Julian's lawyer, a man named Marcus with a voice like a snake sliding through grass, entered the room. He didn't even lower his voice. Why would he? To them, I was just a piece of furniture. "Did you find it?" Marcus asked. "I found more than I expected," Julian replied. His voice, it was different. The warmth was gone. It was clipped, professional, and terrifyingly cold. "The old man left everything to Elias. The estate in the hills, the offshore accounts, the entire trust. It's all tied up in a survival clause. If Elias dies, it passes to me as the sole surviving spouse. But if he lives, it's locked until he turns 30. "And if he's disabled?" asked Marcus. I heard Julian let out a long, slow sigh. I felt the bed shift as he stood up and walked over to me. I kept my eyes closed. I kept my breathing shallow. "He's useless to me like this," Julian said. I felt his shadow fall over my face. "I married a brilliant pianist, not a broken toy I have to carry around for the next 40 years. I can't live with a man who can't even hear me tell him how much I despise him." A chill ran down my spine, colder than the IV fluids dripping into my arm. "So what's the plan?" asked Marcus. "The accident was a start," Julian said, and I could hear the smirk in his voice. but the hospital is too public. We'll take him home in 2 days. The recovery will be difficult, a tragic relapse, a heart that just couldn't take the strain of the trauma." He leaned down then, his breath warm against my ear. It was the most intimate we had been since the crash. "Sleep well, Elias," he whispered, his voice dripping with fake honey. "Enjoy the silence while you can, because soon it's going to be forever." The house felt different. It used to feel like a sanctuary. Now it felt like a cage. Julian carried me across the threshold like a bride. He was smiling for the neighbors, waving at Mrs. Gable next door. "He's doing so well," Julian shouted to her, his voice booming with forced cheer. But the moment the door clicked shut, the smile died. He dropped me onto the sofa with a grunt of effort, not caring that my bruised ribs barked in pain. He is standing in the kitchen now. I am sitting in the living room, staring at a book I'm not reading. I can hear him clinking ice into a glass. I can hear the pour of expensive scotch. "God, he's pathetic," Julian muttered to himself. He walked back into the room and stood right in front of me. He waved a hand in front of my face. I stared straight ahead, my eyes vacant, my heart a screaming prisoner in my chest. "You can't even hear the ice, can you, Elias?" He laughed. It was a sharp, jagged sound. "You were always so sensitive to noise. Now I could set off a bomb in here and you wouldn't blink." He sat down next to me and pulled out his phone. I heard the tap, tap, tap of him typing. "Marcus," he said, putting the phone to his ear. "We're home. The medication arrived. We'll start the treatment tonight. Make sure the paperwork for the inheritance is ready for my signature by Monday. It'll be a tragic weekend for the Thorne family." He reached out and stroked my hair. It was a gesture that used to make me feel safe. Now I feel like I am being touched by a ghost. "You really should have died in that car, Elias," he whispered, his voice casual, as if he were talking about the weather. "It would have been so much cleaner. But don't worry, I'm going to fix it. I'm going to give you exactly what the doctors promised." He leaned in closer, his eyes searching mine for a spark of understanding. Absolute silence. The first pill came with dinner. Julian made pasta, my favorite, the kind with the cream sauce I always requested on special occasions. He set the plate down in front of me with exaggerated care, the fork positioned just so on the napkin. He is performing for an invisible audience, I think. Or maybe he is performing for himself, rehearsing the grief he will wear when I am gone. "I know you can't hear me," he said, his voice syrupy and false. He sat across from me at the dining table, watching me with those ice-blue eyes that once made my stomach flutter. "But the doctor said routine is important, so we'll eat together, like we used to." He pushed a small white pill across the table. It sat next to my water glass like a tiny executioner. "Your medication," he said, pointing at it and then at his own mouth, miming the action of swallowing. "For the pain, for the healing." I can feel my pulse in my throat. The pill is small, innocuous. It could be anything. It could be nothing. But I heard him on the phone. I heard the word treatment wrapped in quotation marks, like a secret buried in plain sight. I picked up the pill. My fingers trembled, not from fear that I let show, but from the injury, the weakness still lingering in my muscles. I brought it to my lips, I opened my mouth, and I tucked it under my tongue. Julian watched me swallow the water. He watched me set the glass down, and then he smiled. A real smile, the kind that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Good boy," he murmured. I want to vomit. I want to scream. Instead, I lower my gaze to my pasta and begin to eat. The cream sauce tastes like ash. Julian stood and walked to the kitchen. I heard the sound of the tap running, the clink of dishes in the sink. And then I heard something else, something that made my blood turn to ice water in my veins. He was humming. It was our song, The one I wrote for him on our first anniversary. The melody I played on the piano while he stood behind me, his hands on my shoulders, his lips against my neck. "I'll love you forever," he had whispered. "You and your music are my whole world." Now he hums it like a funeral dirge. I let the pill slide from under my tongue into my napkin. I folded it carefully, my movements slow and clumsy, the way someone who couldn't hear would move, uncertain, disconnected. I slipped the napkin into my pocket. One pill saved. How many more will there be? That night, Julian made a show of helping me upstairs. His arm was around my waist, his grip firm but not gentle. He's touching me the way you touch luggage, I think. Something that needs to be moved from one place to another. "Careful on the stairs," he said loudly, even though he believed I couldn't hear him. The performance continues. Maybe he's practicing for the paramedics, for the police. I did everything I could. He was so fragile. The accident, it just took too much out of him. He deposited me on the bed, our bed, the one with the navy sheets I picked out, the one where we used to stay tangled together until noon on Sundays. Now it feels like a morgue slab. "I'll be in my office," Julian said, pointing at himself and then at the hallway. "Work, you understand." I nodded. I let my face remain blank, empty. He left, and I heard his footsteps retreat down the hall. I heard the door to his office close, and then I heard the lock click. Why would he lock the door to his office? We never locked doors in this house. We trusted each other. Trusted. The word feels like a relic from another life. I waited. I counted the seconds by the rhythm of my own heartbeat. When I reached 300, I slipped out of bed. My legs were weak, shaking, but I forced them to hold me. I moved to the bedroom door and pressed my ear against the wood. I can hear him talking. His voice is muffled, but I can make out the words if I focus. Yes, the first dose went perfectly. He didn't suspect a thing. A pause. Someone is on the other end of the line. It's a calcium channel blocker, diltiazem. In high doses, it'll slow his heart rate gradually. Combine that with his existing trauma, and it'll look like cardiac failure. Natural. Expected even, given the severity of the accident. My hands are shaking. I press them flat against the door to steady myself. "How long?" Julian asked. Another pause. 5 days, a week at most. His system is already compromised. The doctors will call it a tragedy, not a crime. I can't breathe. The air in the hallway feels too thick, too heavy. And Marcus has the documents ready. The inheritance transfers immediately upon death. No waiting period, no probate complications. The old man's lawyers were thorough, I'll give them that. They just didn't account for me. He laughed. It is a sound I used to love, bright and boyish. Now it is the sound of a predator circling wounded prey. "I'll call you tomorrow, same time. And make sure the pharmacy doesn't keep records of the quantity. We can't have anyone questioning the dosage." The call ended. I heard the soft thud of his phone hitting the desk. And then I heard footsteps. I moved. My body screamed in protest, but I moved faster than I thought possible. I stumbled back to the bed, threw myself onto the mattress, and pulled the covers up to my chin. I closed my eyes. I forced my breathing to slow, to even out. The door opened. Julian's footsteps crossed the room. I felt the mattress dip as he sat down beside me. I felt his hand on my forehead, checking for fever. Still alive, for now. He stood and left the room, closing the door behind him. I opened my eyes and stared at the ceiling. The darkness pressed down on me like a weight. I am trapped in this house with a man who wants me dead, a man I loved, a man I married, a man I thought I knew. The next morning, Julian brought me breakfast in bed, oatmeal with honey, the way I used to make it for myself before the accident, before everything changed. "Eat up," he said, setting the tray on my lap. "You need your strength." I can see the pill sitting next to the bowl, another small white executioner. Julian's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and frowned. "I have to take this," he said, standing. He pointed at the oatmeal and mimed eating. "Finish your breakfast." He left the room, and I heard his voice fade as he walked downstairs. I spat the pill into my palm and stared at it. Diltiazem, a heart medication. In the right dose, it saves lives. In the wrong dose, I need to get out of this house. I need to find help. But who will believe me? I am supposed to be deaf. If I suddenly reveal that I can hear, Julian will know I've been listening. He'll know I heard everything. And if he knows, he won't wait 5 days. He won't wait at all. I am trapped in a cage made of sound and silence. Every word I hear is another bar. Every word I cannot speak is a lock I cannot open. I slipped the pill into the drawer of my nightstand, next to the first one. 2 pills, 2 days. How many more before Julian realizes his plan isn't working? How many more before he tries something else, something faster, messier, impossible to hide? I can hear him downstairs now. His voice is raised, angry. "I don't care what it costs, Marcus. Make it happen. If anyone starts asking questions, I need you to bury them. Do you understand?" A pause. "Good. And send flowers to the hospital. Something expensive. I want everyone to remember how devoted I was, how much I loved him." Loved. He says it like it's past tense already, like I am already gone. But I am not gone. Not yet. I am here, I am listening, and I am going to survive this. By the 3rd day, Julian's patience was wearing thin. I could hear it in the way he slammed the cabinets in the kitchen. I could hear it in the sharp intake of breath when I fumbled with my fork at lunch. He is frustrated that I am still alive, I think. Frustrated that his careful plan is taking too long. "You're stronger than I thought," he said that afternoon, standing in the doorway of the living room. I was sitting on the sofa, staring at the television, even though I couldn't focus on the images. My mind was too busy cataloging sounds, the creak of the floorboards when he walked, the rustle of his clothes, the way his breathing changed when he was lying. "Can you hear me, Elias?" he asked softly. My heart stopped. "Can you hear me?" he repeated, louder this time. "Because sometimes I wonder. Sometimes I see something in your eyes, something that looks almost aware." I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Julian reached out and clapped his hands together right next to my ear. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet room. I didn't flinch. He studied my face for a long moment, searching for a crack in my mask. Then he laughed, short, sharp, bitter. "No, of course not. You're just an empty shell now, aren't you?" He stood up and walked away. "Good. It'll make this easier." When he left the room, I let out a shaking breath. My hands were trembling so hard, I had to clasp them together to stop the shaking. He is getting suspicious. I have to be more careful. One mistake, one single mistake, and he will know. That night, I heard him on the phone again. "It's not working fast enough," Julian hissed. 3 days and he's still eating, still moving. What if someone notices the pills? What if a nurse comes to check on him and runs a blood test? I pressed my ear against the bedroom door, straining to hear every word. "Then we accelerate. Tomorrow, I'll double the dose, and if that doesn't work, we'll have to get creative." Creative, the word hung in the air like a noose. "I'm not going back to being broke, Marcus. I didn't marry him for love. I married him for the money, and I'm not waiting another day longer than I have to." The call ended. I heard him pour another drink. I heard the liquid slosh in the glass. And then I heard him start to cry. It wasn't the sound of grief. It was the sound of frustration, of rage, of a man who had bet everything on a plan and was watching it slip through his fingers. I slid down the door and sat on the floor, my back against the wood. I am running out of time. Tomorrow he will give me 2 pills instead of 1, and the day after that, maybe 3. Eventually, I won't be able to hide them all. Eventually, my body will absorb enough poison to do exactly what he wants. I need a plan. I need an escape. But how do you escape from a man who controls every door, every window, every moment of your day? How do you scream for help when the world thinks you cannot hear? The 4th morning, Julian was different. He woke me early, before the sun had fully risen. The room was still gray with pre-dawn light. He was already dressed, his hair combed, his expression carefully neutral. "We're having a visitor today," he said, speaking slowly and clearly, the way people do when they think you're reading lips. "A nurse. From the hospital. She wants to check on your progress." A nurse. Someone from the outside. Someone who might notice. Someone who might help. Hope flared in my chest, bright and painful. But then Julian leaned down, his mouth close to my ear, and whispered, so softly I almost didn't catch it, "If you do anything at all to make her suspicious, I will make sure your death is slow. Do you understand?" He pulled back and smiled, his hand gentle on my shoulder. "I'll help you get dressed," he said loudly. "We want to make a good impression." The nurse arrived at 9. Her name was Clara, and she had kind eyes and a voice that reminded me of my mother's, warm, steady, safe. She checked my vitals, asked Julian questions about my eating and sleeping habits, and examined the healing bruises on my arms and chest. "He's doing remarkably well," she said, making notes on her clipboard, "considering the severity of the trauma." "He's a fighter," Julian said, his hand resting on my shoulder. His grip was tight, too tight, a warning. Clara turned to me and smiled. "Can you understand me, Elias?" she asked, enunciating each word carefully. I stared at her blankly. She pulled out a small flashlight and shone it in my eyes, checking my pupil response. I let my gaze drift, unfocused. "The deafness is definitely profound, but his cognitive function seems intact. With therapy, he should be able to adapt." "That's wonderful news," Julian said. I could hear the relief in his voice. She suspects nothing. Clara packed up her supplies and stood. "I'll be back next week to check on him again. In the meantime, if you notice any changes, any at all, please call the hospital immediately." "Of course," Julian said. "I'm watching him every moment." He walked her to the door. I heard their voices fade as they moved down the hall, and then I heard something else. Julian's phone, sitting on the coffee table. It buzzed, once, twice, a text message. I looked at the doorway, empty. I could still hear Julian talking to Clara at the front door, his voice warm and grateful. I reached for the phone. My hands are shaking. My heart is pounding so hard I think it might break through my ribs, but I grab the phone and look at the screen. The message is from Marcus. "Pharmacy confirmed. Double dose ready for pickup. No paper trail. You're clear." I hear footsteps. Julian is coming back. I drop the phone back onto the table, exactly where it was. I lean back against the sofa, my eyes vacant, my body limp. Julian entered the room. He picked up his phone and read the message. He smiled. "Good news, Elias," he said, pocketing the phone. "Your medication is ready. We'll start the new dosage tonight." He sat down beside me and took my hand in his. His skin is cold. It has always been cold. "I really did love you once, you know," he said quietly. "In the beginning, before I knew about the money, before I realized how much you were worth." He squeezed my hand. "But love doesn't pay the bills. And you were always too good for me. Too kind, too trusting." He stood up and looked down at me, his expression unreadable. "Good night, Elias," he said. "Sleep well. Tomorrow is going to be a very important day." He left the room, and I heard him climb the stairs to his office. I sat in the darkness, the weight of his words crushing down on me. Tomorrow, the double dose, the beginning of the end. I have one night to figure out how to save my own life. One night to decide if I stay silent or if I scream. Midnight found me in the bathroom, staring at my reflection in the mirror above the sink. I looked like a stranger. My face was hollow, bruised. My eyes were ringed with shadows so dark they looked like bruises themselves. I am disappearing, I think. Day by day, pill by pill, Julian is erasing me. But I am still here. I opened the medicine cabinet, slowly, carefully, mindful of the squeak of the hinges. Inside, I found what I was looking for. Julian's sleeping pills. Zolpidem. He took them every night, had for years. Insomnia, he always said, the curse of an anxious mind. I poured 3 tablets into my palm, enough to knock him out for hours, enough to give me time. I crushed them between 2 spoons, grinding them into a fine powder. The sound was too loud in the quiet bathroom. I froze, listening. But the house remained silent. Julian was in his office, working late. Planning my funeral, probably. Picking out the flowers. I swept the powder into a small envelope I'd torn from a junk mail letter. Then I crept downstairs, my bare feet silent on the carpet. The kitchen was dark. I moved by memory, by instinct. I found Julian's whiskey bottle, the expensive single malt he only drank when he was celebrating. I unscrewed the cap and poured the powder in, shaking the bottle gently to mix it. My hands are steady now. Fear has burned away, leaving only cold determination. I screwed the cap back on and returned the bottle to its place. Then I went back upstairs and climbed into bed. I waited. An hour later, I heard Julian's office door open. I heard his footsteps on the stairs, heavy and tired. I heard him pause outside the bedroom, and I held my breath, wondering if he would come in. But he didn't. He went downstairs instead. I heard the clink of glass, the glug of liquid pouring. He was having his nightcap. I counted the seconds. 100, 200, 300. Then I heard it. The crash of the glass hitting the floor, a muffled curse, the heavy thud of a body collapsing onto the sofa. Silence. I slipped out of bed and crept to the top of the stairs. I peered down into the living room. Julian was sprawled on the sofa, one arm dangling off the edge, his mouth open. His chest rose and fell in the deep rhythmic pattern of drugged sleep. I descended the stairs, each step deliberate, careful. When I reached him, I stood over him for a long moment, studying his face. He looks peaceful, innocent. Like the man I fell in love with 4 years ago, the man who brought me coffee in bed, the man who listened to me play piano for hours, his eyes full of wonder. That man never existed. Or maybe he did once, and the promise of money killed him. I reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. No passcode. He never bothered with one at home. Too trusting, he used to say. The irony is almost funny. I opened his messages. There they were. Dozens of texts between Julian and Marcus. A timeline of betrayal, mapped out in cold, clinical detail. The accident was perfect. No witnesses. He won't make it past the week. The trust transfers automatically. We'll be rich. I took screenshots of everything. I sent them to my own phone, hidden in the nightstand upstairs. Evidence. Proof, insurance. Then I opened his email and found the will, my grandfather's will, the one that left everything to me, the estate, the money, the life Julian wanted so desperately that he was willing to kill for it. I forwarded it to myself. Then I forwarded the pharmacy records showing the diltiazem prescription, filled under a false name. Everything Marcus had promised wouldn't leave a trail. Julian had kept copies. Arrogant, stupid. I'm shaking now, but not from fear, from rage, from the white-hot fury of a man who trusted the wrong person. I put the phone back in his pocket and stood. The front door was 10 feet away. I could leave. I could walk out into the night, find a neighbor, call the police. But what would I tell them? That I've been pretending to be death? That I've been lying to doctors, to nurses, to everyone? They would ask why. And when I told them, they would look at Julian, handsome, charming, devastated Julian, and they would wonder if I was the one who had lost my mind in the accident. No, I need something better, something he can't explain away. I need him to confess. The next morning, Julian woke with a pounding headache and no memory of how he'd ended up on the sofa. "Must have been more tired than I thought," he mumbled, rubbing his temples. I sat at the breakfast table, my expression blank, my hands folded in my lap, the perfect picture of obedient helplessness. Julian made coffee and toast. He set a plate in front of me, along with 2 white pills. "Double dose today," he said, his voice falsely cheerful. "Doctor's orders, to help with the healing." I picked up the first pill. I brought it to my mouth, and I swallowed it. Julian's eyes widened slightly. He hadn't expected that. He'd expected me to hide it, like I'd been doing. He'd expected resistance. I picked up the second pill and swallowed that one too. "Good," Julian said slowly. He sat down across from me, watching me carefully. "That's very good, Elias." I met his eyes, and for just a fraction of a second, I let him see me. Really see me. His face went pale. "Elias," he whispered. I smiled, just a little, just enough. Then I stood up and walked to the sink. I turned on the faucet and stuck my finger down my throat. I vomited the pills into the sink, along with the breakfast I'd barely touched. I rinsed my mouth, turned off the water, and turned around. Julian was standing in the doorway, his face white as paper. "You can hear me," he said. It wasn't a question. I didn't answer. I just stared at him. "How long?" His voice was shaking now. "How long have you been able to hear?" I took a step forward. He took a step back. "Since the hospital," I said. My voice was hoarse from disuse, rough and unfamiliar. "I heard everything, Julian. Every word, every plan, every lie." He opened his mouth, closed it. His hands were trembling. "The inheritance, the money, I never meant—" "You meant every word," I said. My voice is getting stronger now, louder. "You married me for money. You tried to kill me for money. And you were going to live off my grandfather's fortune while pretending to grieve." "Elias, please." "I have the texts," I said. "The emails, the pharmacy records, everything." Julian's face crumpled. He sank into a chair, his head in his hands. "What are you going to do?" he asked. I walked over to him. I crouched down so we were eye to eye. "I'm going to let you choose," I said quietly. "You can confess. You can turn yourself in, admit what you did, and maybe they'll show you mercy. Or," his voice was barely a whisper, "or I call the police right now. I show them everything, and you go to prison for attempted murder. And when you get out, if you get out, you'll have nothing. No money, no reputation, no me." Julian was crying now. Real tears this time, not the fake ones he shed in the hospital. "I loved you," he choked out. "I did, in the beginning." "I know," I said. And I did. I could hear the truth in his voice, buried under layers of greed and desperation. But love wasn't enough for you. It was never going to be enough. I stood up and pulled out my phone. I dialed 911. Julian didn't try to stop me. Epilogue. The police came within 10 minutes. Julian confessed to everything, the plan, the pills, the inheritance scheme. Marcus was arrested the same day. The prosecutor called it one of the most clear-cut cases of attempted murder she'd ever seen. The texts alone were enough to convict. The pharmacy records sealed it. Julian was sentenced to 15 years. Marcus got 10. I sold the house. I couldn't live there anymore. Couldn't sleep in the bed where my husband had planned my death. I moved to the estate in the hills, the one my grandfather had left me, the one Julian had wanted so badly. It's quiet here, peaceful. I can hear everything. The wind in the trees, the birds singing at dawn, the distant sound of the river. I can hear my own heartbeat, steady and strong. I survived. Not because I was strong or brave or clever, but because I listened, because I paid attention to the sounds I wasn't supposed to hear. Sometimes, late at night, I sit at the piano in the music room. I play the song I wrote for Julian, our song, the one he hummed while plotting my death. But I play it differently now, slower, sadder. A requiem for the man I loved, the man who never really existed. And when I'm done, I close the lid and sit in the silence, real silence, the kind I choose, the kind that sets me free. The end.